Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us here on the Flux cast. As always, it is Matt Chalmers, and with me is
Brianna Porter. How is
Hey,
everybody?
Bri, how you going?
Good.
That's great. Now, this week, we've got an interesting one. This week, you'll have to excuse my dog in the background there. This week, we are talking about New South Wales.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about why so many compounders are going down at the moment.
Our poor friends.
And we're going to attribute that to what we call the 7 deadly sins of compounding. Now, what's interesting is some of the feedback from last week's podcast on the PBA forum was, geez, I'm glad that I'm not in New South Wales.
Yeah.
Now, I want to just point out here, this is not 2 New South Wales-centric podcasts in a row, because last week covered the Pharmaceutical Board of Australia, and it just so happens that their lack of wanting to do anything means that New South Wales still has its issues. And that's why people are attributing it to being a New South Wales problem.
Yes, it's mainly occurring in New South Wales. Just the rest of the states haven't quite caught up yet, I don't think.
Yeah, well, so I want to start with. Let's start with the brief outline of the 7 deadly sins. What are the because we've been quite clever here and we've attributed a different topic to each one.
Always very clever, Matt.
So we have the 7 deadly sins. If you don't know, if you didn't grow up as a good Catholic, then you don't know that it is pride, greed, wrath, envy, lust, gluttony, or sloth. Those are the 7 deadly sins. So if you didn't grow up a Catholic or you didn't see the movie Seven, then you wouldn't know that. Now, we're going to just go through each one here and talk about which section we've attributed to, or which thing New South Wales pharmacies are getting hauled over the coals for, and what our suggestions are for dealing with those. What you need to do in the event that you've been caught up in a situation like this. So I guess let's start with something that we know very well, Australia's queen of compounding documentation. So for the sin of sloth, we're going to go ahead and say that is a lack of documentation.
Correct. Too lazy to write it down, guys.
Well, not that bad. Let's say too busy.
Yeah, too busy. Okay, too busy. But with all the inspections and complaints that have come out of those with regards to compounding, an easy get for these guys is documentation, especially the risk assessment component of documentation. So I know with the Pharmacy Council of New South Wales, they did actually specify in their checklist, which is no longer in force, I might add, they specified in their checklist that you had to document every instance of complex compounding, whether it be for a prescription, a repeat, just a request. Every time you get a compounding request, you must document your risk assessment. Now, that's something that not a lot of pharmacists have done. I will take my hat off. There are some guys out there that do it, but for the most part, that's been an easy get for the investigators because they don't write it down. As pharmacists, you inherently do a risk assessment each time you get a script, whether it's compounding or not. You look at the prescription, you make sure it's complete, you make sure that the medication is appropriate for your patient. If you've got concerns, you call the doctor. So you go through these steps, but because you didn't document it, according to the Pharmacy Council, you didn't do it. So that's where these guys are getting tripped up. And the other one as well is your standard operating procedures. Do you have compounding specific SOPs? Do people know where they are? So that's another thing. A lot of people might have like a template manual that they've bought, whether it was from a course or, a supplier, whatever they've done. They've got this template and they stick it on the shelf. And then once it's on the shelf, they go, okay, I've got an SOP manual. They can't tell you what's in it. They can't tell you what it covers, but they also don't customize it to their practice. So this is another undoing because you don't have SOPs for your practice. And if you don't have an SOP for your practice, it doesn't mean anything. You may as well have a magazine for house on your shelf, really. So the standard operating procedures is a big one, and that's almost every complaint that I've heard about have had issue with the SOPs.
Yeah, right. Okay. Now, look, we covered documentation in volume 1 of the Flux education. So
Sure do.
just give us the quick list of what you should be covering in every compounding instance.
In every compounding instance?
Yes.
Okay, so you want to have your risk assessment.
Yes.
A copy of that. You want to have your compounding record. So your compounding record is usually in the form of a form that you would fill out. It would be derived from your master formulation record. And that, but it has further details as to, the ingredient details, including batch numbers, expiry dates, actual weights that have been weighed, all those sort of things. Any records of quality control measures you've taken, any records of deviations in the process as well. So if something happened differently to what the master formulation, you might have used a different diluent or something like that. You need to have that on your compounding record. You need to have a copy of the prescription and any evidence for your suitability and stability of that formulation as well. So if there's a study that you've used to justify the stability on it, attach that. If you've got, you need to have a reference to your master formulation record. So there's quite a few different pieces that you need for each compounding instance. But if you've got a system set up, there's easy ways to link that all together.
Yeah, and you're right. That is something that's very easy for these inspectors from the Pharmacy Council to look at, because they could just pick anything at random and go, show me all the bits of paper that are attached to this.
That's it. And it could be any patient. It could be any instance. So if you've done it for a handful of people, but not everybody, you could draw that unlucky card and be the one that you haven't done the documentation for. So you've got to do it every time.
Yeah.
So,
okay. All right. Moving on. Our next one that we want to cover is greed. Now, I like this one because greed we designated to closed loop arrangements
and Dr. Kickbacks.
Yeah. So just give us the quick rundown. What's the closed loop arrangement?
Closed loop arrangement is where a doctor would direct a prescription to the pharmacy without patient's intervention or choice, basically. The pharmacy board guidelines, not just for compounding, but for pharmacy in general, they dictate the patient's right to accessing their medicines where they choose. It is the patient's choice, and it's important for us as healthcare professionals to maintain that choice for our patients. And a closed loop arrangement removes that from the scenario. So it goes straight from a doctor to a pharmacy, and then back again for a pickup maybe. And depending on how things are getting paid, it could end up being an arrangement where a doctor receives some sort of cut because the patient's picking it up from them. They might be marking it up or something like that. But basically, it's eliminating the pharmacist's interaction with the patient altogether. It also limits other pharmacies from supplying that patient. So a doctor said, well, if you're my patient, you must only go to this pharmacy. This is the only place I want you to go. That's not allowed because that's the doctor's choice, not the patient's choice.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, I want to say about closed loop arrangements. One thing that I kind of, I always found it hard to wrap my head around was the fact that there are just some things that only a specific pharmacy can or will do.
Yeah.
And so, and that pharmacy, and this is kind of reserved for bigger pharmacies, is they'll go out there, they'll have some sort of rep that will go out and maybe see doctors, or they'll see them at conferences or things like that. And they'll educate them on a particular product that they may have developed or that they may be compounding for whatever reason. And then they fall foul of the closed loop arrangements idea just because they're the only pharmacy in the land that can do it.
Yeah, exactly right. It makes it very difficult when you have those situations because it might not necessarily be that there is some sort of kickback scheme. It might not be that the doctor is benefiting financially from the situation, but if you're the only ones, what other choice is there?
Yeah.
So, I guess my advice on those sort of situations would be to documenting that the patient has had a choice in that.
Right.
I think making sure that the patient's aware that the patient has had choice, but also that the pharmacy has some sort of interaction with that patient. There's a lot of online things these days that, you don't even see a person. You fill in a questionnaire and your medicine turns up in the mail.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like they've been around for years. There's been all sorts of iterations of that sort of thing. But that's a classic closed loop arrangement.
Yeah, and that seems to be one of the things that is bringing a few places down right now.
Yes.
That's something that they're really looking at. Yeah, they're really examining that quite closely.
Yes.
They I know that the first thing that they do when they come in and they want to ask about these is they say, "Well, show us your contracts." If you've got a contract, with a clinic like that, then maybe you deserve to get got.
That's it. Should you have a contract? That's something that I know I have spoken to people, because as you say, you have to have due documentation to follow up. But then at the same time, in that instance, by having a contract, that's a closed loop.
Yeah.
That's, so that documentation actually works against you.
Yeah. And you know what though, and from a business point of view, that sucks though.
It does.
That sucks because, how are you supposed to invest in the time, the training, the research, the raw materials, the setting everything up and not have any guarantee that you can maintain that business?
Yeah, it could be gone tomorrow.
Yeah, look, don't think everyone out there listening that we don't empathize with this because that sucks. I certainly do. Because I come from the business side of compounding. So I really do empathize with that.
There's so many gaps in the practicality of it and the compliance. Like I say, a lot of stuff that's in the guidelines it says, and best practice wise, you do need to do certain things. Like even risk assessment wise, we're saying Pharmacy Council said that everybody needs to be doing a written risk assessment for every single prescription. Like, there's some places that have got over 100 prescriptions a day. And they're supposed to do a written risk assessment where they call the patient and discuss with the patient, or they face-to-face consult with the patient. You have a full-time person just sitting doing risk assessments.
Yeah. But that's what they're demanding now in New South Wales.
Exactly. And there's such a gap in the compliance component and the actual real-world component. So it's, and I know when we started Flux, that's something that I wanted to address because you can do a lot of compounding training online, but that's always going to be best practice says. And I've been to places where they said their training courses have taught them that they need to write in and sign a little sheet of paper every time they clean their bench. Between every single item, they sign off a piece of paper saying, I cleaned the bench. I cleaned the bench. I cleaned the bench. I cleaned the bench. I saw them, what are you doing? Oh, well, we have to document every time we clean it. And it was just like, so then they have this piece of paper that just sits in the compounding lab, and it's, to me, it just seems like an ad hoc piece of paper that doesn't really do anything for you. If you want to document that you've cleaned the space before compounding, put it on your compounding record.
Yeah, right.
So, there's compliance and there's real world, and the disconnect makes it really tricky, especially closed loop stuff.
Yeah.
Because like you said, you might just have a doctor that likes the way a pharmacy does it, or they only have the product. They're the only ones that have that product. And that's becoming, especially prevalent with sterile compounding, especially in New South Wales. Like, how many sterile compounders are left in New South Wales now?
Yeah. Yeah, it's not many.
Not many at all. And it's such a specialist product, so they can't just go to any compounding pharmacy.
Yeah.
But do you just leave it to your patient and go, here you go, sayonara, pick where you go? But I think it's a matter of being recommended, but not forcing the patient, having some sort of evidence that the patient's consent has been granted.
Yeah. There's that E word again. I got another E word for you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it's our third one. Education. Education. Now, we have designated education as the sin of pride. That's it. Too proud to
too good for training.
Too proud to go through the motions of training, and
no one's too good for training. Nobody. I don't care how smart you are. You can always learn more.
Well, it seems like the Pharmacy Council of New South Wales agrees with you, because that is something that they are getting people on now as well.
Correct.
Bringing pharmacists in, and they're saying to them, you haven't received any education on this.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And they're
Yeah.
moving away from the more punitive structure that they've used in the past as well, where they are just wanting people to get educated. It's not a matter of just like, well, you're done, see you later, no more, finished. It's a matter of, okay, go away, find some training, skill yourself up, make sure that you know what you're doing, then come back to us and we'll have a chat. So, but, besides Flux Pharma Services, of course, where do you go?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, they say that you can't repeat training.
No. So it's not like you can just do the same one over and over again. That doesn't teach you anything. It's not professional development in any sense.
Yeah, it is the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
And then
right.
it's,
the repetition is not.
Yeah.
Unless you failed it the first time, I guess.
Stop it. So, right, and so that's one thing. I think that what we find is that the education services really are lacking, for want of a better term. I mean, you have the wholesalers courses, which are great. They're they work, and they're a good introduction to compounding. And there's, as I understand it, there's waiting lists to get on and all that sort of stuff. So that's an important facet for this. But aside from us, I can't really think of anyone else that's doing education, not sort of ongoing education of different topics and that sort of thing as well,
and different ad hoc sort of stuff, that because there is so much. And that's a lot of my consulting work that I do is just talking about compounding and people learning from just the experiences and everything. And that's something that is lacking. And that just that ad hoc stuff that's not, it's not how to calculate a capsule. It's not, how to use a balance, although, that's something that is so important. You can't do compounding without those skills. But there's so many other things that are important. And I think the Pharmacy Board forum last week highlighted to us how much more complexity there is to compounding, and it's not just the actual act of compounding itself.
Yeah. Another interesting thing from it last week surrounding education was they kind of just said, you're on your own, go out and find education.
That's it. You come out of pharmacy after your 4-year degree, you can do simple compounding, which at this point is like a sal acid cream on a glass slab. There's a lot of compounding out there that I don't know that many people that actually use a glass slab anymore.
No.
It's, there's so many more technologies that are available, and it's a lot more complex to that. But you don't come out of university. Like, you can own a pharmacy which can compound. Legally, there is nothing stopping you from coming out with your pharmacy degree, opening a store, and having compounding.
Yeah.
But obviously, you'll come undone if you don't have the appropriate training. But there's no pathway for that either. There's no training pathway that's provided through APRA or the APC or anything like that for compounders. You have special things around HMRs, around other pharmacy consulting areas.
Yeah.
But even to the point, we've got a major push on the vaccination education now. And all the different education providers have brought out special COVID vaccination training courses.
Yeah.
But there's still nothing like that for compounding.
I'll just to change, I want to stay in that in the pocket there, but I just want to change pace for a moment. So one of the other things that we found by listening to the various complaints and things that are out there with the Pharmacy Council is they're saying now that essentially the HCCC's backed up. They're not dealing with complaints of this nature anymore. And that they're recommending, or that the Pharmacy Council, but you might be able to clear this up for me, I might be messing this up, but the Pharmacy Council is essentially saying, if you've been found to be doing the wrong thing in any of these areas that we're covering today, you have to go out, bring yourself up to a standard, and return to us and show that you have done that.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Yeah, did I get that? Is
Basically.
Is there anything I expand on that, or?
Yeah, so basically, no, the HCCC, they have adjusted their risk assessment and what their focus will be. There was actually an AJP article a few weeks ago that was discussing the number of complaints and the increase in complaints from the HCCC in regards to compounding, and that was purely because of an increase in their activity. So they were just doing more investigations, therefore there was more complaints. But they have changed their charter at this point. So they've basically said to the Pharmacy Council, you guys deal with it. And so the Pharmacy Council, in a way to manage it under their own resources, because, you know, they have a limited set of resources also, they are advising the pharmacists to go out and to show, they have to prove their competency, basically. The council won't tell them how, or, you know, even to the standard that they want them to be trained to. But they just say, you know, show us that you've done training and that you're competent in that training, and we'll reconsider.
All right. Well, that might be a good time to announce the thing that we were talking about earlier, which is a service that we're offering here at Flux, and that is you can give us a copy of your complaint, confidentially, of course, and we will tailor an education program around the specifics within it, whatever that may be. In any area of compounding, we'll be able to make sure that an education program is presented, and then a competency assessment in line with the national framework can then be presented to the board at the conclusion of the course. So if that's something that you think you might be interested in, you can contact us for more details.
Yeah. We wanted to make sure that we did link it through to those competency standards because, you know, if anything, that's what you'll be assessed against.
Yeah, I'll put those contact details in the episode description. Okay, anything else on education?
I think that was my main points that I wanted to cover.
Right.
Flux Pharma is a monthly membership that delivers education around a range of topics within quality management. Volume 1 covers compounding documentation in great detail. Volume 2 is all about risk assessment. In Volume 3, we show you how to use data gathered from your QMS to improve efficiency within the pharmacy and set quality objectives. And on it goes. All members start at the beginning, meaning that you could have the jump on your competitors implementing these quality procedures simply by joining this month. As we say at Flux, there is a competitive advantage in quality. So, join at fluxpharma.com.au and begin your journey toward better quality management today. Now, where were we?
Now, let's go to something else that's been happening is there has been a fair bit of manufacturing.
Yes.
Now, that's as distinct from our next one, which we'll get to. But manufacturing, now we've given that the sin of envy.
They want to be manufacturers. They want to be a TGA manufacturer, but they just can't. It's not fair.
So what do we mean by manufacturing in this context?
So obviously with compounding, we operate under a manufacturing license exemption. So as a compounder, you do not have to have a manufacturing facility that is licensed by the TGA. But a lot of pharmacies, and it's more so the big guys, the compounding onlys that have come under fire with this sort of thing, is that they are getting in trouble for bulk manufacturing. So making lots of compounds at the same time, which in the forum last week they said is cool as long as you've got a prescription for every single person.
Yeah.
But obviously comes with its own set of risks by doing a large number of products in the one hit. If you make one mistake, all of those people are affected at the same time. But the other thing, and I think the more the biggest sticking point for the council is the making in anticipation.
Yeah.
So, you can't be making things ahead of time, which as a manufacturer they do. It saves time because they have to do testing and things ahead of time as well. But as a compounder, you have to wait till you have a compounding request. Our system has been set up so that compounding is reactive. Compounding is a solution to an issue we have within our healthcare network, basically. And so in that thought process, we can't be making things in anticipation because we don't know what gap is there. we do in reality. This is
Yeah.
another compliance real world disconnect.
Well, I would even say that it might be a sort of an outdated thought as well, because you know the exemption was made, you know, what was it, 40 years ago. Medical advances have changed dramatically in that time.
Yeah.
And certainly our understanding of medicine within the general population as well. I mean, you know, you can pinpoint what the problems are. We know much more about the body right now, the human body right now. I would think that's a sort of outdated way of thinking, and that compounding can exist in that space with just a little bit of manufacturing in anticipation. Not that you can do it. I you know.
Jesus, Matt. Jesus.
You can't do it. No, you can't do it. But what I'm saying is that it should be allowed. It should be allowed so long as you can demonstrate that you're meeting the anticipated need.
Where do you draw the line? How do you gauge the anticipated need?
Well, that's fine. Look, they can put a time on it. They can say a week, a month, whatever. I think that's okay. But see, I actually think that it increases the standard. If you've got something that you can make X amount of, and then you can demonstrate that, you know, via the analytical, you know, HPLC or whatever it is that you're using.
What does HPLC
you can demonstrate
stand
that
for,
it's
Matt?
high performance liquid chromatography.
Woo!
Yeah. Now, I'm keeping my streak of not swearing on this podcast, by the way.
You are very good.
I would think that if you can demonstrate that it is that the stability is there, that your potency is right, that your the product is I think that it's safer that way. I think that manufacturing anticipation, if you put a time limit on it,
so
I think it's safer.
Are you saying to make it anticipation and test it at the same time? So everything
Absolutely.
that goes out is tested.
Yeah. I don't think you can make an anticipation without testing.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Agreed.
That's for absolute sure. But I think that it opens the avenue for testing.
Yes.
And I think it. I think it's one thing that really should be considered by any health regulator. Because, you know, you're looking at the actions of some of these health regulators in you know, particularly in you know, this state, New South Wales.
Yeah.
I mean, they want to shut the barn door on compounding, but guess what? That horse has bolted.
Yeah,
you know?
that's it.
And so in my opinion, they should get in line, and they should say, well, okay, compounding exists now. There's nothing that we can do about that.
Yeah.
Let's work with them on how to make it safer. And I think that this would be a big step in sorry about my dog again. I think that's a big step in making that happen, is allowing manufacturing anticipation, and, you know, certainly put a limit on it, and then allow testing as well for that. You ultimately end up with a safer product.
Yeah, you would need to draw a line, because, and I guess, you know, human nature makes us that way. You're always going to push the limits of how far you can take it. There's always going to be people that do.
Sure.
And I think that's kind of, which I think is the worst reason to do anything, or to not regulate, or to regulate, or whatever, is, you know, the excuse is always, how would we manage that? How would we monitor that? I was like, so we'll just do nothing instead, and not monitor nothing instead. Great option.
Yeah.
But it's the making anticipation, there was actually, and it's been floating around for years, and I think I've driven myself nuts multiple times trying to find where it's actually come from. But there's been this rumor that does run around every now and then about making an anticipation and being allowed to have a certain amount ready.
Right.
So having a week's worth or something, so of a product that they know that they get lots of, like, you know, the classic is vitamin D. D3, you know, they've got lots of patients, but you only dispense 6 at a time, I think. So to actually make a vitamin D capsule, you'd have to, you know, if you've got a 100-hole machine, it makes it very tricky to do 6 at a time.
Sure.
So they would batch it together, but, you know, the terrible B word, batch. But But a lot of these pharmacies would do it ahead of time and have it there waiting for when they get a script come in, which is not allowed, basically. At the end of the day, as much as we have our opinions about what should be and shouldn't be allowed, I think the pharmacy board, in no uncertain terms last week, said unless you have a prescription, you should not be making it.
Wow.
So it's, yeah, I know. Like I said, I've been driving myself nuts trying to find the reference for this. Like, you can have a little bit in stock rumor it's been around for as long as I can remember. And maybe it's a legacy thing that's come from the old days when we didn't have the guidelines.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no reference to it in the regulation or the guidelines or APF or anything like that. So I thought that would be a good thing to bring up to our listeners.
Yeah. Okay. So our next topic here is, or our next sin is wholesaling.
Yeah.
Which we have designated as gluttony.
Yep.
You know what? I feel like gluttony and greed are definitely the same thing, right?
I do too.
Anyway, that's fine.
The Catholics are just big on greed, okay?
This list was made in like 1500 and something. It's fine. It's maybe it meant something different then.
Eating lots, maybe.
Yeah. So wholesaling. Now,
yes.
I want to cover two things here. I want to say what the wholesaling is, but then how it differs from the previous topic of manufacturing there. So, what do you say?
What the difference is?
Yeah.
Well, the manufacturing is the actual making it and having stock. Wholesaling is selling it to other people that aren't patients. Right. So, you become an intermediate step between the patient purchasing a product and you actually making it. There's that extra step in the middle. So, third-party compounding for pharmacies that don't necessarily have a compounding capability in their store. So, there's a lot of pharmacies that would refer their prescriptions for compounding onto a compounding pharmacy and then have it sent back to their store for collection. Now, if there's any kind of markup being put on those products, you have just wholesaled a product to another store. And then they are retailing it to the patient. Yeah.
So essentially what happens is you get in trouble for someone else's
yeah, exactly right. Same actions. Thing if they take your label off it, all of that sort of stuff. For third-party compounding, it should be purely a pickup point.
Right. And so how do you manage that?
So
outside of don't do it.
Yeah, I was going to say, eliminate the risk altogether. Just don't do it. Or, if you do take prescriptions from other pharmacies, have it, mailed directly to the patient instead. The advantage for these pharmacies who are getting the compounded product from your store, the advantage should be that they are keeping those patients in their store. Yeah. The idea is that they come back, they buy their Band-Aids, they buy their nappies, they buy, their Panadol and Nurofen, and they still spend their other money in that store. Whereas if they go to a compounding pharmacy that's down the street, they might buy their Nurofen and Panadol down there instead. Yeah. So that's the idea of it. You shouldn't be making extra money on it. Yeah. And I guess at the end of the day, if you are dealing with a pharmacy who you think might do that, just don't.
Yeah, cut them loose.
Unfortunately, it comes down to trust, which is such a hard thing.
Yeah.
Because how do you prove that you had no idea?
Yeah.
You can document things saying, having some sort of letter that you get them to sign off saying, I will not resell, I will not remove your label, things like that. But at the end of the day, if they're going to do something dodgy, a signed piece of paper is probably not going to stop them.
No, absolutely not.
Those sort of people don't care about that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
If they cared about that, they probably won't do the dodgy on you anyway. So it's a really hard thing to manage. And like you said, really the only way that you can definitely eliminate that risk is just by not doing it.
Yeah.
Which is hard. And I know a lot of places, wholesaling, closed loop arrangements is another one where people do fall into these traps because they don't want to miss out on the business. Like the number of times that you hear people say, but I have to do it or they'll go somewhere else.
Yeah.
But you know what? Let them go somewhere else. If you're going to start doing dodgy things because you want to keep this one client or one patient, it's, that's going to be the beginning of your end.
Yes.
Whether you keep their business or not, you may not have a business at the end of the day because you've got sucked into a closed loop arrangement or you're wholesaling.
Yeah.
That's a bigger undoing than them going to another pharmacy.
Yeah, it's such a tough one to watch this good business to go walking out the door just because there's one little rule that kind of doesn't even make that much sense. And you go...
I can see you squirming about it. It kills you, doesn't it? Kills you.
You know what? No. I made my peace with it a long time ago. And I just went, you know what? It's just, that's that. And you just move on to the next thing. It really... It almost sort of sorted the wheat from the chaff almost because you can't do it. You can't do it. And I used to get upset about that sort of thing. I really did for a long time. And I would worry about that. And then it just, that changed nothing.
No, exactly.
It changed nothing. So that was it.
It's one of those really annoying pieces of business advice, I think, that, people say it and you go, oh God, yeah, righto. But it is a good piece of advice because, it's like the whole, if you're not going to do it properly, don't do it at all. And when people are spreading rumors or whatever, focus on your own work and not what they're, if they're busy talking about you, they're obviously not too busy themselves.
Yes.
And it's kind of, I feel it sort of falls into the same category as those sort of things, like those letting those bad clients go. But it really is true. You've got to focus on doing the right thing. And especially in pharmacy, compliance is so big. So we need to make sure that we are doing the right thing. Otherwise, we won't have a business to service that client anyway.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Really true. Really true. All right. Here is
actually wholesaling. Yes. While we're on that topic, I did want to bring up a tricky one, which came up with the changes to the APF 25, which a lot of people don't realize is decanting. It sort of falls under wholesaling and manufacturing. So when you buy a big 25 kilo drum of powder and you put it into like a 1 litre container so it's easier to use in the lab, that's manufacturing. You are you're changing the primary container of that product.
Wow.
So you can get done for manufacturing on just decanting your own products.
Oof.
If you're in a group of pharmacies who buy a large quantity and then put it into smaller containers to send off to other stores,
you're
wholesaling.
Oh.
Yeah. Which are all these things. And we do it with commercial products as well. You just, people borrow boxes of medication, they pay them back and all that sort of thing. Nuh-uh, not in compounding. It's a big one that you do see so often. But it hasn't really been clear until in the APF 25, they did put in a clause about repackaging.
Wow. That's tricky.
It's dangerous.
Yeah, that's a really tricky one. Wow, because there's probably a few people listening to this right now that are thinking, I do that.
Definitely.
Ooh, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. The next one, so we've got two more here.
Yes.
We've got two more. We've got compounding a commercially available product. This is one that seems to me like it's so obvious.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where you get the question and you go, no, that's definitely not okay. And then they go, but are you sure? And then your brain starts going, am I sure? Like, it seems like such a simple question that it can't be that simple, right?
So this one we designated as lust.
Yeah.
And I think it was more about the fact that we wanted 7 deadly sins.
I was going to say we needed the 7th, right?
And we could find a justification for all of them. I don't know how this is lust.
Yeah. It's a good one to bring up.
Yeah. Other than what was it that you love compounding
Love
so
compounding
much.
so much. You just want to compound
You just want to
everything.
compound all
There
the
you go.
time.
It works.
Compound anything and everything. You're lusting after compounding.
That's it. Hey, it's addictive, guys. Don't start
So-
compounding.
So when we talk about commercially available product, compounding a commercially available product,
Yes.
these rules are. We're not telling anyone here anything. I hope that they don't already know.
No.
I do recall that many years ago, just changing the strength was enough to justify compounding a product. That's no longer the case. Hasn't been for about 4 years now.
Mhm.
The idea now is that if there is a product on the market, a commercially available product with the same therapeutic outcome, you have to use that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if
And-
it's a different drug. If it does the same thing at the end of the day, that's the
Yeah.
commercial
Yeah.
product.
Yeah. And I always, I was explaining that to doctors when they say, well, hang on a second, how come you can't compound this anymore? And I would explain it to them, and I would always use the testosterone
Yes.
example, because I mean testosterone, a lot of men taking testosterone, if they're having testosterone cream, will need 100 milligrams
Yeah.
dose of cream, and the commercially available product is 50, and the pharmacy council says, well, too bad, buy 2. Which I think is a pretty ordinary thing.
Well, my
I
favorite
don't-
on that is like the vitamin D. Commercially available, it's 1,000 IU. So are you supposed to get your patient to take 50 tablets?
Yeah.
It's technically commercially available.
Yeah. But see, this is the thing: is that is not clearly stated either. I mean,
No.
it is probably not unreasonable to say, all right, well, now you got to buy 2 lots of testosterone to make up the same amount of time. It's probably not unreasonable. I thought it was at the time.
Because you lusted after compounding.
Because I lusted after compounding,
See, it works.
and I did think that was unreasonable at the time. However,
In
you
hindsight.
kind of you go, all right, look, I kind of understand that, but what is the limit? Is it 3? All right, well, is it 4?
Yeah.
Okay, and then we make our way all the way up to 50.
Like I said,
right? There's
with
got to
the-
be a limit at
That's
some
it.
point.
With like the compounding in anticipation, where do you draw the line? What's a reasonable amount, really?
Mm.
And that's, there are so many where's the line situations in compounding.
Yeah. And then, obviously the problem is that it's almost like they keep those lines very ambiguous, so that
Yeah, 100%.
yeah.
Pharmacy board guidelines, they're a blunt instrument.
Yeah. Yeah. So, compounding commercially available product, it's no longer enough to change the dose. It's no longer enough to add something,
Nope.
really, unless you can really, really justify it, right?
Yeah, it has to have a pretty good justification if you just added a product, because why can't you just compound that product you've added?
Yeah.
And they take 2 things. They take a compounded whatever and the commercially available product. Or 2 commercially available products. Why
Yeah.
does it
And
have to be in the same?
And so we're seeing that a lot now.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of pharmacies coming undone with that now.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of one of their sore points these days is the just adding something in, especially, vitamins and things that get added on, which don't necessarily add to the therapeutic outcome of that key ingredient. But by adding a vitamin, it's technically a different product.
Yeah.
Which, it's a very, very thin line to walk, that one. I don't think I'd be staking my pharmaceutical license on that one. But also
now-
allergies is another one.
Right.
People are having, they're compounding commercially available products because somebody's got an allergy to an excipient. They're lactose intolerant.
Yeah.
I think something like 60% of the population is actually lactose intolerant.
Yes.
But
Did we talk about this last week?
I think we did.
We did. When we said that, what we've got to make sure is we don't start getting clusters of people that are allergic to excipients.
Just this random, like around where this GP lives, it's just all these really allergenic people. Need to do an environmental study.
Yeah.
That could be
Yeah,
an
is there an
interesting
underground
study, wouldn't it?
smokestack that's near their house or something? What's going on? Yeah. Yeah.
That could be an interesting compounding study, collecting all the allergy information and seeing where clusters are.
I don't think that would be as interesting as it would be dangerous.
Definitely. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff. And, you hear a lot of people say that they compound it because the doctor likes the compounded one because it's cheaper. No.
Yeah.
Not doing that.
Now, our last sin for anyone that's been keeping count is wrath, which we've designated as professional misconduct.
Yes.
Now,
catch-all.
Yeah. What have you seen? What have you seen lately with professional misconduct?
Lack of counselling.
Ooh.
Yeah. So people not counselling sufficiently. Not that they haven't counselled at all, just not sufficiently.
That's a big one.
Yeah. See,
that's a big one.
A lot of these things, and I think they do get professional misconduct for compounding eye drops in non-sterile environments.
Mm-hmm.
That was a professional misconduct call, I think.
Yep.
Trying to think of another one, but
we called it wrath because you're incurring the wrath of the pharmacy council, by the way, by doing this.
If you're getting professional misconduct, they just want you done.
Yeah.
That's kind of comes from the blunt instrument. That's the catch-all of we just don't like what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's such a hard thing to disprove, I guess.
It's where the statement "we feel" anything that falls under professional misconduct,
the we
it
feel
always
committee
starts with "we feel."
Yep, that's it. You've got the we feel, and that comes back to what they were talking about last week with the would it be accepted by the profession in your professional misconduct, professional judgment, it's all ambiguous and linked at the same time. It's a hard one.
Have you got any strategies for dealing with that one?
Ooh.
I mean, if it is the catch-all, there's 1,000 things.
I was going to say, where should I start?
Yeah,
look, counselling is a biggie, and I'm going to shock you here. You ready? Document it.
Oh, Australia's queen of compounding documentation right here, folks.
Anytime you talk to a doctor, you talk to a patient, you talk to a caregiver, anybody you talk to about that patient's compounded medication, write it down. Whether it's in the dispensary notes, whether it's on the back of the bloody compounding record for all I care. Write it down. Just to show that you have actually talked to people, what you talk to them about. If there was any sort of, response that you need to make a note of, if you said to them this is how you dispense it, they go, oh, I'm not going to do that. Make a note that they were reluctant. So if something comes back and they say, well, they never told me, you've written down 3 weeks ago that you instructed the patient on how to use the medication and they just didn't listen. I don't know how that's going to help too much, but at the end of the day, if you document these things, the documentation, it's your evidence. This is how you cover yourself off. That's why documentation, and that's why I harp on it so much, because at the end of the day, it's your evidence. That's what you build your case on.
Yeah.
And whether it's, it might be your evidence for building a case against a complaint, but it could also be your evidence for, introducing a new treatment plan. It could be your evidence for improving your business somehow, but it's your evidence at the end of the day, and it's how you can make these decisions and protect yourself. So I think that's kind of, my biggest thing with all of that sort of stuff is just making sure that you're documenting any interaction you're having.
Yeah.
In regards to counselling, anyway.
Okay.
Sterile compounding or non-sterile compounding of eye drops, don't do it.
Yeah.
That's probably my advice on that one. Which it's actually been mind-boggling the number of places that have been caught doing.
Right.
An eye drop, it's a sterile dose form. It needs a sterile environment. It's sterile compounding is not something to be taken lightly.
Yeah.
And I think that's been undoing with a lot of stuff, is that there is so many moving parts when it comes to sterile compounding. Just to do something like an eye drop.
Yeah.
It seems like a simple thing. It's a solution.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
there are so many things, and I, actually talk about an eye drop in our risk management module as one
Right.
of our examples for the risk
Volume
assessment.
2, right?
Volume 2, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I use that as an example because there are so many things that can go wrong, including your microbial contamination and sterile environments.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you want to hear more on that, sign up.
All right. All right. Well, you know what? That might be a good spot to end it there.
Definitely.
7 Deadly Sins.
I'm glad we did this one.
Yeah, 7 Deadly Sins
It
of
was
compounding. Now, I
fun.
promise, look, I do understand for anyone that's out of New South Wales listening to this and going, well, hang on a second, this doesn't really apply to us here. But, I mean, it does. This is good compounding sense as well.
Yes.
Now, I like I said at the beginning, a lot of people thought that it was that last week's one was about New South Wales as well, but it wasn't. It was about the whole country. So look, we will cover all sorts of things, and of course, if you feel like you would like to come on the Fluxcast, and you have a particular topic in mind that you would like to discuss with myself and Bree, then feel free to drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. We love talking to people, and we'd love to have you on board. So
we've been in lockdown for a long time, so other human beings are great.
We'll talk to anyone. All right. Look, let's leave it there. Thanks, Bree.
All right. Thanks, Matt. I'll talk to you later.
See ya.
Bye.